Grief is so much more than a personal journey. It's how we honor the loss of a loved one with our friends and family. It's communal, and it's one of the ways we all come together to heal. But we also heal in our own unique way. Because there is no one right or wrong way to grieve, we may feel guilty if we don't conform to how we grieve. We may become numb or in denial. We may even laugh or smile as we remember funny stories. Family and friends may judge how we grieve, but people will always judge what is unknown to them. That is not our concern. We all feel pressure to conform at times. Here's how we can grieve on our own terms and how I've dealt with grief in my own life. Around the world, many cultures have an unspoken tradition where close members of a grieving family are expected to show very strong signs of emotion. Extreme weeping, fainting, crying, and screaming are all communicative signs of their deep love and loss. All of us, even if we're in a very Western or modern culture, disconnected from ancient traditions, we all come from that lineage. And in these older cultures, these shows of affection and expressions of grief are not so much a personal grieving process, but rather for the whole family to be encouraged to feel and heal through their pain. It's a cultural understanding that grief must be expressed so that it can be let go. It can be difficult to see when we have not been exposed to other cultures, but the fact is how we grieve, how we express ourselves, and how we view and treat death are all related to our culture. In some cultures, we can see singing, dancing, and joyous festivities when a loved one is lost. In other cultures, grieving can seem closed off, disconnected, and the grieving process may be more private and hidden. Some cultures can hide the body and repress those feelings of grief and loss publicly. They may tell men things like, "Real men don't cry." And boys may overhear this and also adopt a suppression of feelings. And still yet, other cultures will be very expressive, even performative. The close family will not eat for days or weeks. The weeping is intense, but these cultures have passed down the tools to get through the unbearable. Sometimes, weeping is seen as an expression of love for the world to see. Other times, going silent for weeks, not eating for days, and extreme depression convey the immensity of loss. And so whatever culture we're in, there's always some subtle or not so subtle pressure put on us to show our grief in a way that is acceptable and appropriate to our culture. This becomes very difficult if we're a reserved person in an expressive culture. We may feel immense guilt on top of the loss and pain. When I was very young, probably 16 or 17 years old, I was taking a photography class in high school, and it was one of my favorite classes. This was one of the first times in school where I felt a passion for what I was doing. I loved taking pictures, making art, and making anything beautiful. My grandma passed away that semester, during that very photography class actually. Our final photo project was to create a photo book with a theme. I decided that I would choose my grandmother as the topic because I loved her so much and I wanted to honor her with this memorial of not just her passing, but of her life as well. And so I photographed things that made me think of her. I asked my father if it was okay if I could photograph the funeral. He was a little concerned. I asked him what he was concerned about. I told him that I didn't want to take photos of people who are grieving and very emotional. I didn't want to take advantage of anyone's grief or make them feel like they were being watched. And he said, "No, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried that other people will think it's disrespectful to your grandmother or somehow rude in some way." That was the moment I knew I was going to do this. I had to do this. I had thought my father wanted me to be respectful of people in their grief, but he was concerned that people would not be respectful of my way of grieving. At the time, I thought, if anyone doubts my love for my grandma, then those people are so evil and cruel and mean to be mad at a child for showing his love in a slightly stranger but still very beautiful way. From my eyes, I was creating this thing that we can have forever to hold in our hands and think of her. To me, I didn't feel the need to cater to those people who could think so ill of a young teenager honoring his grandma, who could judge him as dishonoring a woman who he was so close to. And so I did it. I didn't get too many stares or too many mean looks, only very few. Everyone was quite loving and, I think, understanding. Nobody said anything about it. But when that photo book was finished, and seeing the tears in people's eyes of joy and healing when they would flip through this photo book, made me know for sure I had made the right decision. If I had grieved the way others would have wanted me to, it would have been much harder to get over the loss. It would have been less special, her life and the beautiful legacy she left behind, if we didn't have this beautiful piece of art dedicated to her and to her life that is still cherished today. When I first heard the news that my grandmother passed, I remember being hard on myself and wondering why I wasn't crying. I thought everyone cries at funerals. You see it in every movie and TV show. And when I heard she died, I didn't cry. I was very self-critical of myself for this. Society had conditioned me to believe that there was a right way and wrong way to grieve. It wasn't until the eulogy, when I read a poem I had written about her, that Niagara Falls burst through my eyes. I barely made it through to the end. Meanwhile, my brother, who was much less emotional in general, much less open about his feelings, I don't believe he cried at all, and I remember feeling this sense of shame for crying. But whether it's suppressing emotions, denialism, or crying our eyes out, these are all common, natural, and normal expressions of grief. There is no right way. There is no wrong way. There is only allowing yourself to be with yourself and not repress any aspect of yourself. Not to let others repress you or let society repress how you express your emotions. This grieving process is a beautiful process designed for us to bear the unbearable, heal, and move forward. But if you are repressed, if you have had it drilled into your head that men don't cry, boys don't cry, or that people shouldn't show their feelings in public, then allow that too, and don't judge yourself for being repressed. Don't judge yourself for being unable to cry. Try to open yourself to the whole grieving experience. The more you resist any part of this process, the more difficult that process becomes. It is a long road to the end of grief, to full healing. We never forget our loved ones, but we can get to a place where remembering our loved ones brings us joy and gratitude for getting to have those beautiful memories. It's easy to resist, to run away from that final destination of acceptance. That path of healing is not an easy road to go down. It is the path of making peace with our greatest source of inner devastation. But once we start down that path, and we can finally see what the end of our journey looks like, we see that it is not as scary as we feared it to be. There is a life forward. There is more joy ahead. We just have to muster the courage and confidence to face that loss, to go through that process, and know deep down that the ones we lost are with us forever. We may not get to make new memories, but the memories we have will be with us forever, and we can be grateful for the times we did have. There would be no grief if there was no love. We only grieve for the ones we love. And we only love because we were so blessed and so lucky to have known such a beautiful soul. Everyone leaves, but not everyone leaves such a wonderful memory and legacy. To have known one of these amazing souls, even for a moment, even though they all leave this world far too soon, puts you among the lucky ones. So be brave, even in your grief. However you are grieving is your way, and that means that it's your right way. Do not feel that you need to earn the acceptance or approval of someone who would judge a person in their most vulnerable and lowest time. We all grieve differently. We all rejoice differently. That is a beautiful truth about being alive. There are so many different kinds of people, and everyone is beautiful. Every person's process of healing is beautiful too. I'm reminded of all those murder cases where the police's main suspect is a spouse or a parent of the victim because they're acting weird or emotionless. But in reality, they may be frozen in shock, and only later does evidence come out that shows they were innocent. These are people who experience something completely unimaginable, and then on top of the pain, to become murder suspects would be a level of difficulty beyond what most people ever have to endure. Everyone reacts to trauma differently. Some people freeze, some people go into denial or a fantasy, and some people will act perfectly normal because it's easier to shut down than it is to feel the pain. Some people have a psychotic break and may even seem happy. And again, this is their trauma response, so they cannot help but laugh or smile in the face of immense loss. Most people react in a way that has been emulated to them, or that they have found useful for coping with trauma in the past. But no matter how we grieve, it is vitally important that we allow ourselves the time and the space for that healing process to take place. Even if you're grieving a family estrangement, whether a child cut you off or you cut off a child or a sibling, or any time family is not speaking, it is equally important that we take the time to heal, because that can be equally as traumatic, if not more so, than a death in the family. But whatever we are grieving, we can create a space of peace and calm around our tumultuous grief without judgment, where we can think about and honor the person or people we've lost. We can remember them, we can laugh, we can cry, and we can spend time caressing our pain, loving our tears, and really cradling ourselves, because we need that self-love. And that love will heal. That love is there for all of us, even if it comes from within our own heart. If grief is love unexpressed, then express that love to yourself so the healing can take place.